I'm Dawn Hill, host of Heart, Mind, and Purpose, a podcast where we explore what it means to live an aligned and wholehearted life. I am a professional counselor with over 25 years of experience and a deep love for meaningful conversation. I bring you honest reflections, soulful questions, and meaningful tools for managing life. Whether you're seeking clarity, connection, or simply a space to breathe, this podcast is here for you. Tune in weekly and join me on the journey.
Welcome to Heart, Mind, and Purpose, the podcast where we explore how our inner lives shape the way we love, connect, and grow. Hi, this is Paul Gramercy, producer of today's episode, where Dawn asks the question, have you ever found yourself thinking, I just don't feel like myself anymore? Maybe life has become so busy, filled with responsibilities, caregiving, work, or simply surviving, but somewhere along the way you stop feeling connected to the person you used to be. Today, Dawn begins a special two-part series called Coming Home to Yourself, Small Shifts That Change Everything. In part one, she explores the quiet ways we can become disconnected from ourselves and why it's more common than you might think. If you've ever felt like that you've lost a part of yourself, I think you'll find hope in today's conversation. Now here's your host, Dawn Hill, with Coming Home to Yourself, Small Shifts That Change Everything.
Welcome back to Heart, Mind, and Purpose. Every once in a while, there comes a topic that simply can't be rushed. And as I began gathering research, reflecting on conversations from my counseling office, and thinking about what so many people are quietly carrying, I realized this needed to be more than one single episode. So today begins the first of a two-part conversation called Coming Home to Yourself, Small Shifts That Change Everything. If you've ever found yourself thinking, I don't feel like myself anymore, then I hope you'll stay with me for both episodes. In this first episode, we are going to explore something that many people experience but often struggle to put in words: the quiet ways we can become disconnected from ourselves. We'll talk about the seasons of life that slowly pull us away from who we are and why that experience is much more common than you might think. Next week, in part two, we'll look at something I find incredibly hopeful. We'll explore what the neuroscience teaches us about the remarkable ways our brains are designed to protect us, understanding how our brains and nervous systems work and can replace self-criticism with self-compassion, and help us to understand we are often not broken, we are adapting. My hope is that in these two conversations, help will feel seen, understood, and perhaps even a little more hopeful than it did before you pressed play. So maybe you haven't lost yourself, and I want to begin today with a sentence I've heard hundreds of times over the years in my counseling office, and it usually comes quietly, sometimes with tears, sometimes with frustration, sometimes almost as a whisper, and it is this: I just don't feel like myself anymore. Have you ever said that? Maybe not aloud, maybe only to yourself, maybe while driving home from work, or maybe while standing in the kitchen making dinner, maybe after everyone else has gone to bed. It is such an interesting statement, isn't it? I don't feel like myself. Think about what that sentence assumes. It assumes that somewhere deep inside, you still recognize the person you are longing to reconnect with. You remember what it felt like to laugh more easily, to dream, to feel curious, to wake up with energy, to feel emotionally present and feel connected to yourself. And if you don't feel like yourself, then maybe part of you still remembers who that person is. And I find that incredibly hopeful, because perhaps you haven't disappeared. Perhaps you've simply become disconnected. There's a big difference between those two things. When you see something is lost, we assume it's gone forever. When something is disconnected, it can be reconnected. I wonder if that's where some of you find yourself today. Nothing dramatic has happened, no crisis, no catastrophic event. Life has simply been life, with responsibilities, schedules, bills, children, parents, work, laundry, emails, and appointments. Maybe caring for someone you love, maybe navigating illness. and maybe grieving someone you've lost, maybe trying to hold on to everything and hold everyone together. One ordinary day after another, and somewhere in the middle of all of that, you quietly drifted away from yourself. Not all at once. No one wakes up on a Tuesday morning and says, I think today I'll lose myself. It happens much more quietly than that. One busy season becomes another. One responsibility turns into 5. One difficult year becomes several. One disappointment changes how you see yourself. One role slowly becomes your identity. You become a mom or a dad, or a caregiver, or the reliable one, or the strong one, or maybe the one everyone depends on. And while those are beautiful roles, they were never meant to become your entire identity. I remember talking with one woman who said, I spend all day taking care of everyone else. Honestly, I don't even know what I enjoy anymore. She wasn't depressed. She loved her family, and she loved being a mother. But somewhere along the way, she had become so focused on everyone else's needs that she stopped asking herself a very simple question. What do I need today? Not because she was selfish, but because she had forgotten she was somebody worth caring for, too. And maybe you've experienced something similar, or perhaps your story looks different. Maybe you've recently retired, and for 40 years your calendar told you who you were. People needed you, deadlines mattered, and meetings filled your day, and then suddenly, silence. At first it feels wonderful, until one morning you wonder, if I'm no longer doing what I've always done, who am I now? Or perhaps you're an empty nester. For years your life revolved around soccer games, school schedules, homework, and family dinners, and then one day the house becomes quiet. And while you're grateful your children are growing into independent adults, you're also finding yourself asking, what now? These aren't signs something is wrong with you. These are signs that you're human. Life is constantly changing, and every major transition invites us to ask a question, who am I in this season? And that's different than who am I now? Or I don't know me. I think one of the greatest myths our culture tells us is that if we feel disconnected, then we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to take a trip, or quit the job, buy something new, start over, or find yourself. But what if that's the wrong question? What if the goal isn't to reinvent yourself, but to reconnect with yourself? And that feels much gentler to me and much more hopeful. And I believe much more true. I love taking walks, not because I'm trying to break a fitness record and not because I'm training for a marathon. I walk because something happens when I slow down enough to notice what's around me. I notice the birds I would have missed, the breeze I wouldn't felt, the seasons changing, the smell after it rains, children laughing in a nearby yard, a neighbor tending flowers. None of those things were new. They were already there. I simply hadn't been paying attention. And I wonder if reconnecting with ourselves is something like that. Maybe we don't need to become someone new. Maybe we simply need to notice what has been there all along. And that thought reminds me of coming home after a long trip. Have you ever noticed that feeling? You unlock the front door, you set your suitcase down, and then you take a deep breath. Everything is familiar. The chair where you drink your morning coffee, the family photos on the wall, the kitchen where so many ordinary moments have unfolded. There's something about being home that allows your body to exhale, and it is safe, familiar, and comfortable. And I wonder if our souls long for something similar, not a different life, and not a different or a new identity, but a place where we can finally rest in who we really are. Maybe that's what this journey is about, not finding yourself, but coming home to yourself. And if that's true, how did we become disconnected in the first place? The answer might surprise you because it isn't simply about stress or busyness or even burnout. Part of the answer lies in something absolutely remarkable about the way God designed our brains. And understanding it may help us replace self-criticism with something much kinder, understanding. As we come to the end of today's conversation, I'd like to leave you with one thought. If you've been listening and quietly thinking, that's me, I hope you hold on to this. Maybe you haven't lost yourself. Maybe you simply become disconnected from yourself. And if that's true, then there is tremendous hope, because what has become disconnected can be reconnected. Not overnight, not with one dramatic decision, but through small, intentional steps, through grace, through curiosity, through paying attention once again to the life that's already unfolding around you. This week, I'd like to invite you to do just one thing. Don't try to fix yourself. Don't try to reinvent yourself. Simply notice. Notice what brings you peace. Notice when you feel most like yourself. Notice what gives you energy. And notice what quietly drains you. Then take a walk, or sit on the porch, or simply spend a few minutes in prayer. Listen to the birds or watch a sunset, and allow yourself to become curious instead of critical. Sometimes the journey home begins with something as simple as paying attention. Next week, we're going to continue this conversation by exploring something that I believe is incredibly encouraging. We will look at what neuroscience has discovered about how our brains are designed to protect us, why we naturally drift into autopilot, how chronic stress changes the way we experience ourselves and the world around us, and why understanding your brain can help replace shame with compassion. When we understand what's happening beneath the surface, we often discover there's much more hope than we realized. Thank you so much for spending time with me today on Heart, Mind, and Purpose. If this episode resonated with you or you found it encouraging, please consider sharing it with someone you feel might be in need of hearing it. Until next time, may you be kind to your heart, clear in your mind, and grounded in your purpose. Thanks for being here.
We hope this episode gave you a deeper understanding of how your brain is designed to protect you and why some of your reactions may make more sense than you realize. As always, our goal is to bring you insight grounded in research while then making it meaningful and practical for everyday life. You can find resources, listener handouts, and more at dawnmariehill.com/heart. And if you have questions or comments, you can reach Dawn at heartmindandpurpose.podcast@gmail.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. And if you found this conversation helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Next week, Dawn continues the conversation with something both fascinating and encouraging: how God designed our brains to protect us. She'll explore the neuroscience behind stress, habits, and emotional survival, and how understanding our brains can help us replace self-criticism with compassion. Until then, take a few moments this week to slow down, to notice, and perhaps take a few small steps toward coming home to yourself. Thanks for listening to Heart, Mind, and Purpose as we continue exploring the heart, the mind, and the purpose woven through it all. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.